The war surgeon, Dr. Anya Petrova, worked on the front line, treating soldiers from both sides under the unseen oath of neutrality. Discovery of her secret clinic meant immediate execution for treason. But the real test came when two patients arrived simultaneously: the young son of her best friend, Sasha, and the enemy's high-value commander, Colonel Kalima. With only one operating table and time running out, Anya had to make an impossible choice that challenged the very meaning of medicine and survival. The air in the eastern Ukrainian fields was not just cold. It was acrid, thick with a perpetual scent of gunpowder, burning infrastructure and fear. Dr. Anya Petrova, a trauma surgeon of immense skill and composure, had willingly walked into this environment, setting up her field clinic in the reinforced concrete basement of a derelict, half-bombed schoolhouse miles from any established military hospital. At 35, Anya's hands, though steady and precise, carried the invisible weight of every shattered bone and torn flesh she had encountered. Her mission was singular, guided not by flags or politics, but by the relentless, silent authority of the Hippocratic Oath. Anya's clinic was a fragile bubble of neutrality in a landscape consumed by binary hatred. Her rule was absolute. Once a patient crossed the threshold, they ceased to be Russian or Ukrainian. They became a trauma case, a piece of broken anatomy awaiting restoration. A small, trusted team of international volunteers, a handful of nurses, a seasoned anesthesiologist, and an elderly local woman, Alina, who managed supplies, adhered to this doctrine with religious fervor. They treated every case, from the young, bewildered Ukrainian conscript with shrapnel wounds to the taciturn, frostbitten Russian tank crewman with a fractured femur, under the same oath of silence. Discovery by either side of this operational neutrality would mean immediate accusation of treason or espionage, sealing their fates with swift, brutal finality. The logistical nightmares were endless. Power relied on a temperamental, fuel-guzzling generator. Supplies were smuggled through winding, dangerous backroads. But the moral weight was the heaviest burden. Operating on the enemy was a constant test of Anya's humanity. One afternoon, she spent 3 hours meticulously saving the dominant hand of a young Russian lieutenant, Roman, who had been injured by a drone strike. Roman was alert during the final stages of the surgery. Later that night, she heard the distant, muffled sobbing of a local mother whose own son had been killed by a shell fired from a Russian tank. The sheer, irreconcilable symmetry of destruction and salvation was a psychological trench she fought daily not to fall into. She learned to compartmentalize ruthlessly, seeing only the damaged tissue, the collapsing lung, the hemorrhaging artery. Never the uniform, never the ideology. The situation grew increasingly perilous. Rumors of Anya's unusual clinic, whispers of soldiers from opposing trenches being treated side by side in recovery, began to circulate among the local resistance. Major Volkov, the relentless, highly decorated Ukrainian commander whose forces held the immediate sector, sent an envoy warning Anya that any suspicion of aiding the enemy would be met with immediate investigation and severe consequences. At the same time, the local populace, who relied on Anya's clinic for basic medical aid, began to turn wary, caught between gratitude and fear. Anya knew she was running out of time before the political line breached her ethical one. The approaching winter brought a massive, sustained Russian offensive, pushing the front line dangerously close to the schoolhouse. Explosions became a constant percussion, rattling the concrete basement and threatening to collapse the very sanctuary they worked in. Amidst the relentless shelling, Anya was presented with the ultimate, terrifying ethical test. A test delivered not by philosophical debate, but by the chaos of immediate trauma. The conflict had just ripped a hole in her fragile bubble, bringing the war right to her operating table, demanding a decision that would define not just her future, but her soul. The night of the major offensive was a blur of smoke, cold air, and screaming triage cases. The generator struggled, casting the operating theater in a constant, anxiety-inducing flicker. In the midst of the chaos, Major Volkov's soldiers burst into the clinic, their faces grim. They carried 2 patients on makeshift stretchers. The sight of the first, a young boy, Sasha, no older than 10, the son of Anya's closest friend Yevgenia, sent a spike of maternal terror through Anya's professional calm. Sasha had suffered a devastating abdominal injury, his life leaking out through massive internal damage. He required immediate, complex, sustained surgery. The second patient was massive, uniformed, and barely conscious. A high-ranking Russian colonel, Ivan Kalima, who had suffered a catastrophic cranial injury from an artillery blast. His survival depended on Anya performing an incredibly delicate neurosurgery, a procedure that would consume hours, the entire attention of the anesthesiologist, and nearly every unit of their critical blood supply. The moral calculus was instant and paralyzing. One operating table, two impossible lives. Sasha was the child of her friend, a boy of her own land, requiring trauma surgery that demanded immediate attention but could, perhaps, be stabilized for 40 minutes. Colonel Kalima was the enemy commander, the symbol of the very destruction surrounding them, whose neurological trauma required immediate intervention to prevent brain death, a procedure that, once started, could not be interrupted. To choose the colonel was to condemn Sasha to a potentially fatal delay. To choose Sasha was to condemn the colonel, a man whose capture or death held significant strategic value to Major Volkov's forces. Anya ordered the rapid stabilization of both patients, her mind racing against the clock and the ethical abyss. The true complication arrived minutes later. Major Volkov himself entered the clinic, his eyes narrowing instantly upon seeing the Russian colonel. "What is he doing here, doctor? You are treating the butcher of Kharkiv." Volkov's rage was cold, absolute, and justified by the carnage outside. "He is a patient, Major," Anya stated, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Under my oath, he is only a trauma case." Volkov ignored the plea, his hand resting menacingly on his sidearm. "Sasha goes first, doctor. You attend to the boy. If the colonel dies while you are busy, I will consider it a professional courtesy." The unspoken threat was clear. Choose the enemy and you become one. But choosing Sasha meant letting the colonel die, violating the oath she had maintained at such immense personal cost. Anya looked from the pleading, terrified face of Sasha's mother, Yevgenia had followed the convoy, to the critical vitals of the colonel. She made the decision that honored the oath, but defied all personal logic. Sasha needs immediate care, but his stabilization affords us a brief window. The colonel's brain trauma is time-critical. I must address the colonel first to prevent irreversible damage. I will need all hands. Volkov's face hardened. His men immediately moved to seize the colonel, but Anya stepped between them and the operating table, picking up a scalpel. "The moment you interfere, Major, you kill both of them. You want this man alive for intelligence, Major. If you want him alive, you will ensure our neutrality is respected for the next 4 hours. And you will provide us with the blood we need." Volkov, recognizing the truth of her surgical authority and the strategic value of the captive colonel, reluctantly relented, demanding only that his guards secure the perimeter. The atmosphere in the basement became a terrifying silent standoff, a Ukrainian major and his men protecting a Russian colonel, all under the command of an ethical surgeon. Anya performed the complex neurosurgery on the colonel flawlessly. 4 hours later the procedure was done, his vital signs stable. She immediately turned to Sasha. She operated with a speed and fury born of sheer exhaustion and maternal desperation. Sasha survived the initial surgery, stabilized and strong enough to be transported. The climax arrived at dawn. Volkov prepared to transport the colonel and Sasha to secure locations. He looked at Anya, his expression one of grudging respect mixed with profound resentment. "You chose the enemy's life over the safety of your own. Your commitment is dangerous, doctor. I chose the oath, Major. That is the only flag I serve." As Volkov's convoy prepared to leave, a unit of Russian reconnaissance troops, alerted to the colonel's position, launched a final, desperate ambush. The ensuing firefight trapped the entire group, Volkov's men, the Russian troops, and Anya's civilian medical team, in a desperate crossfire. Seeing the chaos and the potential loss of the now stable colonel, Anya ran into the crossfire, holding up a bloodied surgical towel, a symbol of the profession. She screamed, He lives. The colonel is stable. We have wounded on both sides. Stop the firing. The sheer absurdity of the surgeon demanding a ceasefire brought a temporary, stunned halt to the battle. Volkov's men and the opposing Russian troops, facing heavy casualties, lowered their weapons just long enough for Anya to broker a temporary, fragile humanitarian truce. Enough time to evacuate the critically wounded from both sides under a shared, unspoken acknowledgement that life, for that brief moment, mattered more than the war. Anya watched the convoy depart, her work done. She had chosen the highest form of victory, proving that the medical oath, however invisible, could impose a brief moment of sanity and peace on the brutal reality of the battlefield. The war continued, but the unseen oath was upheld. Anya chose the oath over the flag, forcing a moment of sanity on the battlefield. She proved that human life is the only true currency in war. Would you have chosen the enemy commander for strategic value, or the dying child for love? Tell us your ethical decision in the comments below. Subscribe to Just an Unusual Story for more high-impact narratives on ethical justice.